everyone, I hope you're doing all kinds of well. Today I'm here to share with you my TTC journey, my trying to conceive journey. If you've seen the video where I announced that I was pregnant, that video was recorded back in December, I had been capturing the disappointment, let's call it that, the least, since we started trying for a baby. So every month I would do some pregnancy tests, and obviously they were all negative up until December. So I've been recording that whole journey, and that's all on that video. I will leave it linked up here in the cards and down there in the description. Then in December there was our 7th cycle trying, and that's when we finally got a positive test result. So as you can imagine, even though it wasn't the worst TTC journey, I know there's people out there struggling for years, and with this video I don't mean to brag or offend anyone. I also don't want to trigger anyone. So obviously we're going to be talking about trying for a baby and having negative test results, but also having a positive test result at the end. So if this is in somehow triggering for someone, then please feel free to skip this video, because that's the last thing that I want to do. When we were in the midst of trying to conceive, one thing that did help me was watching these kind of videos and seeing what other people were going through. I did a bunch of research online, but just watching these videos of other people who were also struggling made it all feel much more realistic and normal and somehow expected. I know that we all have this impression that when you want to have a baby, you just go and you make the baby, but the reality is that it doesn't usually happen like that, and most couples do take a couple of months to be able to get pregnant. Some of them sadly take longer. So what I'm going to talk about today is my journey, what happened to me, the conclusions that I reached, the exams that I did, and obviously this might not be at all related to your situation, but like I said, when it was me in that scenario, it did help me listening to other people's stories and other people's descriptions of what was happening and what was causing what. So without further ado, let's get started. I made some notes and I'll try not to make this video incredibly long, but if at the end you have any questions or anything that I didn't explain correctly or anything at all, then obviously feel free to drop me a comment down there. So pretty much my entire adult life, since I got my period around 13 or 14 years old, I've been on the pill, and I've always taken the same pill. I've been to the doctor back then and recently and everything. I've always been told that I didn't really need to stop the pill, because pills nowadays no longer need to be stopped. Back in the day, every few years you needed to stop the pill for a few months to give your body a chance to cleanse itself. But what my doctor told me, it was that nowadays that's no longer applicable, and so I didn't need to stop it. So I've been on the pill non-stop for almost 15 years, and obviously on the pill my periods were all super regular, never delayed by a day or anything, as regular as it gets. I never had any side effects of the pill, anything. I love the pill. I didn't have any mood swings, I didn't have any cramps, I didn't have breast pain, I didn't have anything. So I know that some people hate the pill. In my case, it was absolutely fantastic. Then in 2021, towards the end of the year, we decided we wanted to start trying for a baby soon. So I stopped the pill in September 2021, after all those years. And I knew that it might take a while, especially if it's been so long since you've been on the pill. I knew it might take a while for your body to readjust, and technically you are only ready to start trying for a baby after your cycles regulate and you have one fixed cycle every month, and they come and go pretty much at the same time. And my cycles were regular pretty much straight away. I was having one period a month. Obviously it was not to the dot anymore. It was not on that specific day that the period was going to show up, but it was never too far away from what was expected. I was using one of those apps to track it, and if the app was saying my period was going to show up on a Tuesday, maybe sometimes it would show up on a Thursday instead, but never too far away, and always just one period a month. So they got regular pretty much straight away. But even then we decided to give it a couple of months just for it to be 100% regular, and we started trying on the cycle that I had in February, and the first round of pregnancy tests that I did was in March 2022. One thing about me is that I am a true believer in science. I do everything based on science and scientific knowledge. So I did a lot of research on how the human body works and how cycles work, ovulation cycles, what causes what makes the egg being released, and all the research that I did was all based on scientific evidence and not any other speculations that some people believe. If that's you, no judging, totally up to you, but me personally, I rather go through a scientific approach. It took me a while to learn how it all works. It's a lot of information, and it's one of those things that you kind of, at least myself, I kind of learned about it in school, but not to this kind of degree, and obviously it had been a bunch of years, so I didn't remember the details anymore. But I discovered that cycle day 1 was the first day of your period, and then cycle day 2, 3, blah blah blah, until the end of your period. My cycles were about 5-6 days for the period, and then after you have the period and you continue counting the days. Basically you count the days up until the next cycle day 1, i.e. the next time your period shows up. And at some point in those cycle days you will have an ovulation day, and your ovulation day should ideally be around the same cycle day. In the scientific community, to make things easy to explain to everyone, an average cycle is considered to be 28 days, so between one period and the other there goes 28 days, and the ovulation day is estimated to be around cycle day 14, so exactly halfway through. Obviously that's just the average, and for most people it will not coincide like that, which was my case. So the best way of finding out what your cycles are is to obviously track them and count the days. And you can just do this with apps that will just estimate the cycle days based on your last periods, and every time you input a new period it adjusts the calculations. But an even better way I found, at least for myself, was using ovulation test strips. There's a million different ovulation test strips that you can buy nowadays, some more expensive, some cheaper. I went through the cheaper route. I ended up buying this box out of Amazon. I don't have the box anymore because I was storing the tests in a drawer, but it was a box that had, I believe, 50 ovulation tests that came like this in a blue package, and 20, I believe, pregnancy tests in a pink package. And the whole box cost like £15, at least back then. And yes, I did go through a few boxes because this was a long, lengthy process. So the way it works is that every day, twice a day, you use the ovulation tests to measure your ovulation. So you pee in a cup. I'm gonna open one to show you how it looks like. So you pee in a cup and then you open the little package, and in here you have the strap test. So then you dip this bit here at the bottom inside your pee cup until the line, and then the ink will raise and you will have 2 lines. So you always have 2 lines on the ovulation tests. And me being the person that I am, obviously, I was keeping them. So I just got a plain normal notebook and I started keeping my ovulation tests so I could keep a record of it. As you can see, they always have 2 lines. One is the control line and one is the test line, but the test line is always there, unlike a pregnancy test. And the goal is that eventually the test line will become darker than the control, and that means that you have reached your LH surge. It's a hormone, which then means your ovulation is going to happen 12 to 36 hours later. So I was doing that, keeping all the tests. I was gluing them on. I was using double-sided tape, so I would just put the tape on and then peel the top when I had a new test and put the test on the bottom. On this side, I was keeping if it was a low, high, or a peak result. The smiley faces here was because I was also using another ovulation test from another pack from Clear Blue. Like I said, there is a lot of them. The Clear Blues are more expensive, and they were both giving me the same result, so I don't see the point on having multiple tests. But obviously when you're in the midst of it, sometimes you just want to be secure of your results. The highlight square was when I figured my ovulation was happening. So again, like I said, once the line becomes really, really dark, the next day will be the predicted ovulation day. And that's what I was marking down here. So then you do your baby dancing, and supposedly there should be around 12 to 14 days, at least 10 days between your ovulation day and your next period, i.e. cycle day 1 of the following cycle. Then for each cycle I would also do pregnancy tests. The pregnancy tests are the pink ones like I showed you, and you do them ideally with the first morning urine. So again, you pee in a little cup, you dip the test, you wait 2 or 3 minutes, and if there is 1 line, it's negative. If there is 2 lines, regardless of how faint it is, it would be positive. And as you can see, it was negative, and here I ended up getting my period, so I just wrote cycle day 1. So then you have your period, you wait again for how many days your period is, and after you start the next cycle. On this case, I started on cycle day 7 after having my period, and there I went again with all my ovulation tests twice a day, ideally, in case your peak is really quick. Some women have really quick peaks, so if you're only testing once a day, you might actually miss it. That's why they say ideally you test twice. And so I went, this is the second cycle. As you can see, a lot of ovulation tests. You figure out where your peak was. Here it is, marked in yellow, and then you do your baby making things. And then rinse and repeat until you either get a positive test or you have your period. Like I was saying, ideally you want at least 10 days between your ovulation and your next period. That's called a 2 weeks wait, because that's the time that supposedly it takes the egg to go from your ovary to your uterus. The egg would hopefully be fertilized. It will start emitting hormones together with the sac where it was released from in your ovaries. It will emit some hormones for your brain, which will then say for your period not to show up in order to not flush the whole thing out. So you need around 10 days, ideally more, but at least 10 days. And by doing all of this, what I realized was that my luteal phase, which is what that phase is called, between the ovulation and the period, was really short. And by really short, I mean I was having like 5 or 6 days between my ovulation and my next period. I was ovulating really late. My cycles were consistent, around 28 or 29 days at this time, but I was ovulating, like on this one, I ovulated on cycle day 23. So as you can see, it was really late, and 7 days later, on the 7th day, I got my period. So I started realizing there was not enough. I did some research, I found out that it's called luteal phase deficiency, and it basically means that your body is not producing enough progesterone, because the progesterone, I don't remember the details anymore, but it was one of the hormones responsible for making sure that everything matches and that the period doesn't show up and all that. So I called my GP and I said that we've been trying for a baby and that I knew I was having a luteal phase deficiency because I've been testing for ovulation, and what can they do to help me. And in the UK, at least that's how it works and that's what they explained to me, they cannot really do anything until you've been trying for 2 years or you are over 35 years old and struggling, which neither of them was my case. But she said that just to reassure me, they could do just some simple blood tests to confirm ovulation, which she also said that if I'm having regular periods, it most likely means I am ovulating, because usually if you are not ovulating, you also don't have a regular period. So the way blood tests work for ovulation confirmation is they do twice in one cycle. They do one on cycle day 1, 2, or 3. So during your period, they will do one, and that's to measure your hormone levels, and that will give them the baseline of your hormones. So when your hormones are as low as they go, that's the number you have. So they do that because obviously it varies from woman to woman. And then they do one around cycle day 14, 15, or 16, which should match the ovulation day, and they should be able to see a peak of hormones on those second blood tests comparative to the first ones. So I started going for those tests, and they could never find my ovulation on the second round, and I told them I don't think I'm ovulating yet, I think I'm ovulating much later. So every month we would push the second round of tests later and later and later until they could find a peak. Spoiler alert, they never found a peak, even though I did 6 or 7 rounds of blood tests. What they did find, however, and that was by sheer coincidence, because the lab made a mistake, or the person who ordered the blood tests made a mistake, or whatever it was, someone made a mistake along the way. And there was one test where when it got to the lab, instead of them measuring the hormones on the blood, they measured the vitamins, which is just a standard test that people do all the time. I don't know why they did that. I think honestly it was just a mistake, because when my doctor called me with the results and she was looking at them for the first time, she was even like, oh, that's really weird, they measured this instead of that. But luckily they did that, because by measuring the vitamins, they discovered a severe vitamin D deficiency in my blood. Vitamin D is the one that you get from the sun, amongst other things, but the sun is the main component. And it was very ironic because I live in the UK and we don't have a lot of sun, but I had a severe vitamin D deficiency. So she said, okay, let's carry on with the blood test and try and still find your ovulation, but meanwhile just start taking some vitamins. You can just take some vitamin D supplements, but given that you're trying to conceive, just take some trying to conceive vitamins. So that's what I started doing, and I started taking 1 pill every single night. From Pregnant Care, they have a wide variety of vitamins, and one of them is the trying to conceive one. They have a bunch of things, including vitamin D. And it was so interesting because the cycle after I started taking the vitamin D, my period was late 7 days for the first time in forever. And obviously I was freaking out. I was doing pregnancy tests multiple times a day. My period was not showing up. I called the doctor. I said, my period is not showing up. What do I do? I had other rounds of blood tests booked, and I needed to do them between day 1 and 3 like I explained, but my period wasn't showing up, so I had to keep postponing the tests. But I was freaking out, and I was telling her my period was late, and she kept being like, are you sure you're doing tests and everything? And I was doing all sorts of tests. I was doing these cheap ones, but I was also doing the clear blue ones and the first response ones and all sorts of tests, and they're all negative. Eventually, after 7 or 8 days, my period did show up. But the reason why I'm telling you this was because that was the first cycle where the vitamin D actually started impacting what was happening in my body. So the vitamin D is somehow related to the progesterone production. So if you have low vitamin D, you also have low progesterone Don't quote me, I'm not a doctor, but if my memory doesn't fail me, there's a correlation between them. So my period was late because my cycle was adjusting, because I was now getting more vitamin D, which means I was getting more progesterone. The cycle after that, the cycle shrank again. So on that cycle I had like 36 days or something of cycle because the period was so late. But then on the following ones, the cycle started shrinking and shrinking, and then it stabilized around 29-30 days. But the interesting bit was that my ovulation started being much earlier in the month. So it stopped being around day 23 and it started actually being around day 15 or 16. I was checking my little notebook to see if I had the ovulation strips from those cycles, but I don't. This whole process was so long, and I'm not gonna lie, it was a little bit painful and frustrating and all that. So eventually I was still doing the tests, the ovulation tests, but I would just bin them instead of keeping them. Because back then I was like, I'm keeping all these tests for nothing. They're all showing the same. Why am I keeping them? I could just, you know, I can just look at them and record them on the app that I was using, which was the Primum one. I'll put a picture here of the app so you know which one I'm talking about. You scan the test on the app and it also gives you numbers and gives you graphs and all of that, and it's very useful. But I started binning the test, that's why I don't have them here. So every month it was the same thing. I was still measuring for ovulation and I was still measuring for pregnancy. I would usually wait until 7 DPO, which means 7 days past ovulation. Ideally you want to wait until like at least 10 DPO because it's not likely that anything is gonna show up before that on the tests. But an entire week, 7 days already waiting, knowing you're ovulated on that day, when this is something you want so bad, it's already very difficult, at least for me. So rarely I would be able to wait until 10 DPO, and I would just start testing for pregnancy on 7 DPO. Rinse and repeat, the same thing month after month, month after month, negative results. But at least I could see that my cycles were changing, because I could see the cycle itself shrinking back to normal and the ovulation getting earlier and earlier and earlier, which meant that my luteal phase was also getting longer, and that was the whole goal of this thing. Then eventually on my 7th cycle, which was in December, I don't have the ovulation tests for that cycle because, like I said, I was in the phase where I was just binning them. And to be honest, when I started doing the pregnancy tests, I started on 7 DPO and I binned that test as well because it was negative. And the following day, cycle day 8, I binned them as well. But on cycle day 9, I got a positive pregnancy test. So I literally went through the bin because I had them used but still inside the little package. So I just picked the little packages out of my bathroom bin so I could keep the tests and start tracking. And these were all the pregnancy tests that I did on that cycle. It had been so long that I was just obsessed, for the lack of a better word, to see the line getting darker. Because, let me see if I can show you. The very first one is cycle day 7, there's nothing there. Then the next two are cycle day 8. Now because they're dry, you can see a small faint line, but back then there was nothing there. Like they were just the control line and the rest was blank, like a complete negative test. But then after they dried, the line showed up somehow, which was really weird. But on this one, on the third one, which is still cycle day 8, there's nothing there. You cannot see anything. So it showed up in some of them, but not all of them. I guess it's because this second cycle day 8 was done in the afternoon and not with the first morning urine, so the hormones weren't as strong. But then here it is on cycle day 9, which is this line here. There was a faint line, and that was the test that I looked at on that video that I shared when I go like, oh, it was this test. So I marked it here. There was a positive result and I was freaking out. And every day I just kept taking tests and seeing the line getting darker and darker and darker. Again, they're all dry now and it's been a bunch of months, so the lines kind of all look the same. You can still kind of see it here, that it was getting a bit darker, and then these ones all just look the same. I did a few more over here and I was gonna do them a bunch, but the last one that I did was on 27 DPO, so 27 days past ovulation. Now, like I said previously, a pregnancy test is positive regardless of how dark the line is. So as long as the line is there, it doesn't matter if it's dark or not. But I feel like for most people who are in the TTC journey, it's like you don't believe it. You see the line there, you know what it means, but at the same time, you've seen so many of those tests through the month, and you've seen how negative they are, that when you see a faint line, even though every month you swear to yourself there's a line there, people call it line eyes. So people say, no, my God, there's a line there. There never is. But when the line is actually there, it's like you don't believe it. It's like you tell yourself, no, it's not. It's just you making up things like you do every month. At least that's what I was feeling for myself. And that's why I kept testing every day and seeing the line. And then when the line was clearly there, I was still like, oh my God, is it actually? Together with all those pregnancy tests, I also did a bunch of actual stick tests of a bunch of different brands. There's some from Poundland, there's a bunch from Clear Blue, There's clear blue digitals. They're now empty because the battery has run off. There is the first response ones. Something in me made me keep taking pregnancy tests. They have the labels at the back of when they were, so I could keep track of them. This is one of the ones where you can see it most clearly, that it definitely says it's pregnant. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it was difficult for me to stop taking pregnancy tests and to just accept it, that it was true and it was happening. Like I said, you don't believe yourself, and you have all these tests. I had all these cheaper ones and most expensive ones all lined up on the counter, and every night I would just stare at them and be like, could it actually be true? Is it real? Is it actually happening? So this was my TTC journey. My delay was caused by the lack of vitamin D, which I'm very happy, because from all the things that could be, lack of one vitamin is nothing special. It was fixed just by taking vitamins. And that's why when someone asks me what's the best advice if they're trying to conceive, my first thing is just start taking vitamins, because it cannot hurt you. And if you do happen to have deficiency of something, the vitamins will fix it, hopefully. I know it's very difficult. It's a very hard place to be in, and trying to conceive puts a lot of barriers in ourselves, because we do grow up thinking, oh, don't have sex because you'll get pregnant and die. And then in reality, there's like 2, maybe 3 days every month where you can actually get pregnant. And it's not that easy. Even when you're actively trying and you're actively finding your ovulation, there's so many things that can go wrong. The way our body works and the way everything is connected to each other, it's magical. I know it's science and I love science, but at the same time it's so magical how everything is related to each other. So this was my journey. This was what happened to me, what was causing what, and how I fixed it, and how we ended up here at 8 months pregnant. I can't believe baby boy is almost here. I hope this video helped somehow if you're also trying to conceive. I know that sometimes seeing positive stories is a little bit discouraging, because you want it so bad for yourself, and this person is telling you the story. It's like, yeah, it's easier for you to say because you managed. But I hope that if that's the place where you are, I hope you manage as well. I wish you nothing but good luck and baby energy and good vibes. And I know it sucks, I know it's so dismotivating, but I hope you have a good support network around you, an encouraging partner, good friends. My friends didn't know I was trying, so it was just me and my husband. Back then he wasn't my husband yet, but it was just me and Josh going through this alone. And I know it gets really dismotivating sometimes. So if you do want to chat with someone, feel free to drop me a comment. I'm always free to have a chat about it. Sometimes it helps talking to a stranger more than it would help talking to someone you know, because the stranger is not going to judge you, is not going to bump into you on your way to get groceries. If you feel like you want to chat about your situation or just vent a little bit or whatnot, just feel free to drop me a comment. If you want to have a private conversation, drop me a comment saying that, and I'll give you my email or something. But like I was saying, I do wish you the very best of luck. You got this. Keep trying. Eventually you'll get there, and I hope you get everything that you wished for. I hope this video helped somehow. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you very soon here on the channel with another video.